So what do we have here? An AMD Asus 6600 for $499. Guys, I have some bad news. Budget PC gaming is officially dead. Hey guys, Tiago here with Classical Technology. Remember to subscribe and smash that like button for more GPU content like this. Alright, so today we're going to talk about budget PC gaming and how it's pretty much dead, and nothing makes it more obvious than the release of the AMD 6600. If you saw that in the beginning of the video, that's a regular 6600, not even a 6600 XT for $499. That's the price of a 3070's MSRP, you know, the 2080 Ti killer that everybody sold their 2080 Ti's when this was announced. You remember that GPU, right? $499. And here, even though it is a third-party, Asus GPU, the MSRP should be $329. This is MSRP at Micro Center, $499 for this GPU. Definitely pretty crazy. As I was reading through reviews today of this GPU, and I'd recommend you guys read PC World. Brad Chacos did a really phenomenal review of the 6600. He came pretty much to the same conclusion. It's a great 1080p GPU, but the price, like all other GPUs, just really too high to be able to stomach. Now, let's put this in a little bit of a perspective. Let's take the original $329 price for this GPU. I remember myself going into Micro Center, but I think it was like last year, and buying a 5700 XT for basically the same price. It might have been like $350 or something like that. Now, $350 for a GPU caliber of the 5700 XT, that's going to be an entirely different story than this, especially if you consider that GPU is almost, 2 years old at this point. So 5700 XT could even do 1440p really well, even a little bit of 4K if you keep everything, minimized to maybe medium or lower settings. So to go a few years later and have a GPU that basically only really does 1080p and not even high refresh rate 1080p, that's going to be more reserved for something like a 6600 XT, or better yet, the 6700 XT, which now often sells for a pretty hilarious $800 to $1,000 for that caliber of GPU. So the 6600 isn't even that. We're talking about pretty regular, straightforward 1080p, not high refresh rate playing. Now, is it a good GPU to play 1080p? Sure, it's a good GPU, nothing really wrong with it. It's very efficient, definitely for more actual performance numbers. I remember to check out the review that I'm going to link below that Brad did over at PC World. You could see, very efficient GPU. It keeps up with other GPUs as well, even if some are a little bit older, like a 2060 or a 5700. Now, the major problem here is the price that you're paying for this. And we all know, with all the shortages, we know GPU prices are coming up. This is just sort of an official reminder of sort of the standard now that we're really going to be looking at for what should have been a budget GPU. Several years ago, you would have gotten a GPU that does great at 1080p for likely under $200, either from Nvidia or even from AMD themselves. $329 MSRP, that's, as we all know, the suggested price. I bet you that on the secondhand market, these are going to command a premium, not as much as other GPUs, like from, maybe some of the Nvidia competing GPUs, or just because it's, a little bit less powerful, it's a little bit less of a market. But even if it's a little bit already over that price, the MSRP is already way too high. So anything on the secondhand market is going to be way too high as well. I mean, look at it this way. If you buy a 3080, a completely different class of GPU, that's a high-end GPU, and you're paying maybe a few hundred over what you should have been in terms of its MSRP, because there's no other way around it, at least then you have a highly performing GPU that's certainly going to last years. You can do, 4K right now. You'll be able to use that GPU for a very long time. A GPU like the 6600, as decent as it is currently for 1080p, you're going to be pretty much limited to that. You're never going to be able to go to 4K or go to other resolutions. So that's a GPU you probably are going to have to upgrade within a year or two if you get serious about your PC gaming. Very limited, and considering the price that it starts at, certainly kind of disappointing, to be honest. While the performance isn't bad for the caliber of GPU targeting 1080p, for the price that you're paying, even comparing with competing Nvidia products. Certainly, it is just very, very disappointing. This is a GPU that could have really been fantastic as a starter or budget GPU, even considering sort of all the manufacturing delays if it came in under $300. I'm not even wishing at this point for an MSRP of like $199, which would have been awesome for a GPU of this caliber, and that's really where it probably should have been, from $199 to maybe $250. That's where AMD, if they want to sort of get more GPUs out in the market and the mind share of gamers so they don't feel ripped off buying these GPUs, that's really the price bracket that this thing should have been. At over $300, you're really getting into what used to be the mid-range. And remember, while AMD has been highly competitive this generation with Nvidia still pretty much is the boss on the block. Most gamers still kind of go towards the Nvidia GPUs. They sell a considerable more amount of those GPUs. So if it ends up that gamers actually have a choice between AMD and Nvidia, AMD pricing their GPUs at basically the same premium that Nvidia does, just because there's sort of manufacturing shortages and all of these worldwide problems, really probably doesn't bode well for AMD in terms of their future mindshare, as well as really getting a grasp on the market. I think if they started the GPUs at a cheaper MSRP, they would certainly, much like they did against Intel with CPUs, start to win back some of that mindshare from Nvidia, because gamers would say, you know, when things were tough, when everybody was ripping us off, when GPU shortages were a very real thing and we could get absolutely nothing at a reasonable price, AMD kind of stepped in, even though they didn't have maybe as much stock as we would like, but at least the price was fair. But no, it seems that AMD is playing the same game as Nvidia and basically pricing this GPU as high as they can really get away with. Now, certainly there are some pricing strategies from Nvidia that are actually kind of interesting to look. It's almost like a dual world. Now, follow me with this thought. It's a little bit of different, but look at the MSRP of the 3080 at $699. All right, you're saying you can't get that at $699 unless it's a weird Best Buy drop that it almost splits up the GPU market in terms of acquiring a GPU into like a dual world. This is what I mean by this. Now, we all know that even in regular times, third-party GPUs like those from Asus, EVGA, MSI typically will command a premium because they're going to put on a fancy cooler and really change it around, unless it's a very bare bones card. So you can expect to pay maybe $100 to $150 more typically for like the 3080 like that. Now, with all of the shortages, understandably, in some cases, not so understandably in other cases where these GPUs are over $1,000, the 3080 has gone up in MSRP from third-party sellers. But even though people see like a 3080 for $1,100, maybe from Asus or something like that, when Nvidia still does like a Best Buy drop, the GPU is still $699. So they could definitely sell that for more. People turn around right away and sell it for maybe 2.5 to 3 times the price on the secondhand market. But Nvidia has sort of kept that artificially low. At least people feel like that it's not as bad from the MSRP, and then they shift their blame towards scalpers and other issues. And while AMD has also done that to a certain extent on selling directly from their website, certainly has been extremely limited, and I think they could have easily priced the MSRP of this GPU maybe in the high 200s range, and we all know that as it hits the secondhand market, that price is going to go up anyway, and the third-party AIB partners are going to put on whatever price they want to anyway. Look at that, $329 starting price of the 6600, but on the same shelf in stock at Micro Center, you have a $499 Asus 6600, not an XT. So what really explains that difference? One company just has to make up for more of their overhead and whatever else they're losing with the shortages than the one selling it for $329. Are we really to believe that it's a $170 difference between the same GPU just because one has maybe a little bit better cooler or perhaps a better PCB? Definitely not. You could see a $20 to $50 difference. Maybe that would be reasonable, but this much of a difference is definitely outrageous, and it shows you that the companies are just pretty much flat out taking advantage of the situation as much as they can. So in that case, I mean, the 6600 XT had the same high pricing problem as sort of this GPU does now. This one just seems to hit a little bit worse just because it's a little bit more of an underperforming GPU in terms of today's resolutions like 1440p and 4K. Yes, a lot of people still play at 1080p, but with this GPU, you're not even getting full 1080p performance, which would be high refresh rate, like on the 6600 XT. You're getting just good 1080p performance, which is really something we got 2 or 3 years ago already in the sort of the mid-range market from the 2060 and GPUs like that. So it's really nothing new. And remember, using the 3070 as a reference at 499 MSRP, that's way too close to even 329, not to mention the other third-party prices that are all pretty much a little bit screwed up. That's way too close for the massive performance gap that you have between these GPUs. So that's going to lead us to the next question. What happens after this? If you're somebody really sort of on a budget nowadays in terms of PC gaming, what do you do? Like, what GPU do you wait for? Is there going to be a 6500? What's that going to be able to do low at 1080p? Like, it can't really get any worse. Are you going to wait for Nvidia to re-release the 2060 from like 2 years ago? I don't really know if any of that makes sense. I mean, I guess this is going to be the new entry point if you want to have some type of a reasonable sort of gaming experience on the PC. Looks like you certainly will be at least $329 or above, and most likely with all of the pricing discrepancies that exist in the market today, you're probably going to be somewhere between $400 to $500 to get started with a GPU like this. So the key point here is, regardless if it's manufacturing delays or inflation, if we're going to see more expensive GPUs, I hope that we at least see better performance to be able to justify these prices. If the 6600 had been more like a 6600 XT and you could do high refresh rate gaming like you could on the other GPU for that price, that would have been a little bit easier to swallow, but as it stands now, definitely way too expensive. All right, guys, so let me know what you think. Do you think budget PC gaming is dead? Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.